everybody gets what they want when government is localized down to the community level, such that you can form a community with your own rules, your own regulations, your own taxes and government, although I would say it's not really government when it's a voluntary local organization like that, of course, in many ways, many governance functions will
like an HOA.
Yeah, right. With my campaign, with Kokesh for President, we are turning the American presidential election into a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. So when
it's already turned into a reality show, so anything you want to do is already going to be more legitimate than that. So.
Well, I'm going in as a bankruptcy agent. That's the platform.
If you are close to retirement or recently retired, you can't afford to miss this commercial. What if I told you one of the biggest dangers to running out of money in retirement was a risk you've never heard of before? If you've never heard of sequence of return risk, please check out the trailer at sequenceofreturnrisk.com. And remember, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Benjamin Franklin.
So today it's my honor to welcome Adam Kokesh to the podcast. I've been a longtime fan of Adam. For those of you who don't know, Adam's been a longtime freedom fighter. He was in the Marines, and basically upon getting out of the Marines, you wanted to voice your displeasure at the war, so to speak, and everything.
That was the start of it, yeah.
And then how did you first kind of get involved? Was it like the day you came home, you were going to be this freedom activist, or just how did that?
If you really want the backstory on that, it goes back to when I was a little kid and my mom drove me and my brother around everywhere, and we had a choice between oldies or classical on the radio, and so it was always oldies, and I think that was a pretty big influence on me. My mom was vaguely liberal, my dad was vaguely conservative, but they were both pretty anti-authoritarian, and so I had that, I think, ingrained in me, that spirit of independence or rebellion, or just not wanting to be controlled. And I was a libertarian in high school when they said, do you want to be a Republican or Democrat? And I was like, wait. This is America. There's got to be an option here. I don't have to be lame, do I? Like, really, they got to at least be able to opt out. And they said, well, there's these libertarians over here. They like to be left alone. And I was just a punk kid. So I was like, yep, leave you alone. Sign me up for that.
So you actually knew what libertarianism was in high school?
Well, no.
Or at least a word.
No, yeah, see, and this is jumping way ahead, but one of the reasons I'm so passionate about not letting someone who doesn't represent the ethical and philosophical message of libertarian take on the Libertarian Party platform at all is because I got the watered-down political version of the message, the compromised, and it's sort of like through the foggy, corrupt, violent, disgusting lens of statism and politics. If you take this beautiful ethical message of self-ownership and non-aggression principle and voluntarism that is the core of the message of freedom, that is libertarianism, you end up with socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can be only as wrong as the Republicans and Democrats, or half as wrong, whatever. But when I volunteered to go join the Marines, I wasn't thinking about the ethical message. When I volunteered to go to Iraq in 2004, I wasn't thinking about the ethical message. When I tortured people during the siege of Fallujah, I wasn't thinking about the ethical message. And I think it's really important, if we want to change the world, that we get a message out there that's based on our principles. Now, I think we combine that with practical policy that immediately makes everyone's lives better. That's the basis of my campaign platform, of localizing government. But if we lose this opportunity that we have, that the government has given us with every election cycle, and we hide behind the skirts of someone who gives us credibility by being more like those mainstream old parties. First of all, we're falling for the mainstream media as the propaganda wing of this two old party system that makes us think that that's the center of American politics. It's not. The center is much closer to libertarianism, even among people who will never understand it philosophically. They understand that government is a racket. They understand that voting is a waste of time. We're talking about the 40% of Americans who never vote in U.S. presidential elections.
It's almost like 49.
Not 40%
it's like
of Americans. Well, it's 40% of eligible voters. You add in felons, and everybody who's disqualified becomes a lot more. But even of the people who do vote, most of them know it's a waste of time, or they're voting reluctantly. You know, they're holding their
20%,
nose.
like maybe 20% are hardcore Democrat, hardcore Republican, you're going to vote no matter what.
Who vote enthusiastically with them. And even most of them, with my pitch, with the pitch for localization, means that, hey, if you like your government, you can keep it. You just can't force everybody into this national one-size-fits-all solution. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, wouldn't you rather have a Republican or Democrat state than have a one-size-fits-all national government solution that is, you know, forcing you to be tied to people you disagree with, leading you to be governed in ways that you don't want to be governed? You know, how about that? You localize government, everybody gets what they want.
No, yeah.
So I know now we just jumped ahead and like wait all over the place, and I guess you know, like that's, and go to thefreedomline.com to sign up and help out for Kokesh for President 2020. And I guess we can just cut the interview there, right?
Yeah, we're done.
That was a beautiful overview, though.
No, that was great. And so, just so the viewers know that today is really the culmination of the Taxation and Stuff tour. You were in, what was it, 68 cities over the past.
Well, it started as that. It ended up as a lot more. But yeah, we've been on the road. Yeah, for 3.5 months, and it's been a blast all over the country. Started with 68 cities. I think we added 5 or 6, and it kind of depends how you want to count them. But
and a different vehicle.
Yeah, we added this vehicle. Before we were just in a Suburban, little Freedom trailer, and we've leveled up on every stop on this tour, building organization. So now this is the culmination, the final stop, coming here to Phoenix tonight in my home state in Arizona. But even better than that, tomorrow we have a Yavapai County Libertarian Party meeting. I'm the chair of Yavapai County LP, and then we finally get to go back to my place for a party, and then I get one day at home before I go back on the road. Okay. But yeah, we've been recruiting delegates. We've been recruiting state coordinators. We're building a 50 state, but it's also plus DC, plus the territories, and if I was Barack Obama, it would be 57 state. But we're building a national organization with coordinators on the ground in every state, with more than enough delegates and would-be delegates to.
Is there any super delegates?
Everybody's a super delegate. So if you wanted to ask earlier, I'll jump ahead if you don't mind about the process. There are no relevant primaries in the Libertarian Party nomination for president process. So if a couple of states, I think it's 5 or 6 states, hold symbolic primaries where just by state law they're like, well, you're a registered party, so we're putting you on the ballot, but it's non-binding. It's completely irrelevant. So for the state conventions, that's where the state parties select their delegates to go to the national convention. And by the old party's definitions, they're all super delegates, and that they can all vote for whomever they like. They can do whatever they like. They are representing themselves as individual party members at the national convention. And it is at the national convention that the national chair is determined, the national vice chair, the members of the board, the national committee who are up for re-election, national policy is determined, and the national platform as well. So while we're doing this now in 2017, it's because we want to have a dominant presence at the 2018 national convention.
Now.
Part of it is a warm-up, but it's also to bring about the appropriate reforms within the Libertarian Party that are necessary going into 2020, and really to make the party a political force instead of a debate club. And we've been a debate club for a long time, and we play these silly games about no true libertarian and how many libertarian angels can dance on the head of a pin, while the old parties are walking all over us electorally because they're being inclusive. They are scrambling to include people, and they do it by pandering. We do it by showing how our principles make their lives better. But if we just argue over the principles and the ideals, we're never going to get anywhere. And in fact, it really disgusts me to see that within the party there are factions actively trying to push other factions out, where it's like, hey, if they want to be a part of this, like, they're not challenging our statement of principles. It takes 7/8 majority at a national convention to change the statement of principles. Like, that's locked in. And that's the beautiful principle at the heart of libertarianism, the non-aggression principle, that, you know, the party is truly founded on. And if you want to be a debate club, keep debating. But for those of us who are doers rather than talkers, we're going to come in and we're going to out-organize you. And we are going to make localization a part of the party platform in 2018. That is, right now the statements of the platform basically say we support the elimination and reduction of government as much as possible. We just want to add localization in there on equal footing. So we support the elimination, reduction, and localization of government wherever possible, which means that we accept it as a legitimate option instead of saying we're going to force our libertarian ideas on an entire group of people, like an entire country. No, we're going to...
If you guys want to be communists, go be communists. If you guys want to be anarchists, go be anarchists. Even though now anarchists has gotten hijacked by Antifa, and that's a whole nother...
You're getting ahead of it. See, exactly. Is that ultimately the point is everybody gets what they want when government is localized down to the community level, such that you can form a community with your own rules, your own regulations, your own taxes and government, although I would say it's not really government when it's a voluntary local organization like that, of course, in many ways, many governance functions will
like an HOA.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But a lot of the functions now will be carried out by global organizations, companies, blockchains, where you have networks based on people's needs, like insurance and dispute resolution, those kinds of government functions, as opposed to things that are actually geographically based, like public safety, trash reduction, emergency services, which of course you'll have better competition for locally. You'll have technology that will render them obsolete. But even just with present technology, how do we extricate ourselves? How do we get out of this system? How do we get out from under the thumb of the behemoth? And the answer is really simple, because it also is the one that gets the most people on board.
First, you have to know you're underneath the behemoth to begin with, which is
well, no, you don't. See, that's part of the brilliance of the strategy, is that you don't have to agree. Like, I mean, you think about it. You look at Hillary Clinton. Look at Donald Trump. Look at every mainstream party politician. Like, what do they do that allows them to succeed fundamentally differently? That doesn't compromise our principles. It's different from what we do in the Libertarian Party. And it's that they don't say, in order to vote for me, you have to agree with me on 100% of everything. And by the way, you know, every libertarian is going to say, well, to me, and it's funny to hear this at every stop, well, I agree with you on 90-something X% of whatever. And it's like, if you agree with anybody else on 100%, you're not a real libertarian. Yeah, right. No, you're not a real libertarian. If you say I agree, because you're not thinking for yourself. But the thing is,
I probably agree with you on 90% of this stuff.
Right. It's okay, because they've all got it wrong anyway. Because I'm the only true libertarian, because I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time, so there. But you see, what we're doing is saying, look, you don't have to agree with me on my entire worldview, my aesthetics, my sense of human history, my philosophy. It's politics now. And politics is, how do we get the most people on board with a practical plan that immediately improves everyone's lives? And of course, the old parties, when the things that they do to succeed that we don't want to do is take money from corrupt interests that benefit, because elections are advanced auctions of stolen goods, right? And it's based on who votes and who competes for the corrupt policies that those politicians are going to put out. But the thing that we need to see that they are doing right, the way that they're able to keep us out, the way that they're able to say government is legitimate, is that it has a consent of the majority of the public. So we need to take that consent away. So with my campaign, with Kokesh for President, we are turning the American presidential election into a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. So when
it's already turned into a reality show, so anything you want to do is already going to be more legitimate than that. So.
Well, I'm going in as a bankruptcy agent. That's the platform. And right now we say I'm running for not president because we're not filing FEC paperwork yet. We will be shortly. But it's also more accurate to say that I'm running for not president, because the platform is the peaceful, orderly dissolution of the entire United States federal government. We immediately declared of no authority with one executive order that I go in and sign on the first day, which includes my resignation. And it includes, as much as possible and as much detail as we can, the entire process, agency by agency, what agencies get spun off, what get just liquidated, which ones get parted up into 50 pieces to go to the states.
Would it be easier to list which ones aren't going to be?
Yeah, right. Well, no, but my point is there will be a comprehensive plan that people will be voting on. This will be released by the National Convention of the LP in 2020, and the American people will know exactly what they are voting for. And you can vote for one of the old parties, or you can vote for nobody to be president. It's not for me to be president. It's something fundamentally different. Should the federal government be allowed to exist at all? Is there anything that the state governments can't do better than the federal government? Do we really have to be united under one government?
They can't extort me as good. They can take away my rights as well as a federal bureaucracy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. There's no good things that the federal government does better than states.
And I take a look at, from the financial angle, that really kind of got into this whole world as, one day somebody told me that the Federal Reserve is private. I was on the class that actually won the national competition on the Federal Reserve. Our saying was, "In Fed we trust." I mean, they talk about the brainwashing and conditioning. And I didn't believe this guy. He looked like Rob Zombie. And I still remember the day that he told me this. And I was like, "You're full of shit. I'm going to prove you wrong." And he told me about Ron Paul, Freedom to Fascism. And then my wife, girlfriend at the time, happened to buy me the book, Creature from Jekyll Island. And so in that book, you've got Paul Warburg, who says, we shall have a one-world government. It's only a matter of it's through consent or conquest. So part of the reason why, I was advocating for Donald Trump was because I thought that he would be better to be able to pick up the pieces for however this thing collapses than, let's say, Hillary Clinton, and that'd be in a FEMA camp. But then now I see Donald Trump waffling on stuff where, he's putting globalists in at the Fed. And really, it's like, great, we have a best case scenario, we have a 3 to 7 year reprieve before all hell breaks loose. And in the grand scheme of things of, your great grandchildren who aren't even alive yet, a 3 to 7 year reprieve is nothing. And I look at having $20 trillion of debt, and that doesn't even include the unfunded liabilities. It doesn't include Social Security. It doesn't include Medicare. That's more than Social Security. And it gets to a certain point where, since the money's based off of debt, we're all basically living underneath this high-tech slavery that you can never get out from. And really what, Ernie, right now we're broadcasting in the parking lot of Freedom's Phoenix. And is this the Freedom Mobile?
Yeah, well, no, this is No Force One.
Oh, that is, you know what, I did see that on your Facebook. So we're coming live from No Force One. But really, he got me to understand that instead of spending all this time, Tim, getting people to audit the Fed, that's bullshit. Stop getting people to end the Fed. And really, he was right that you should be ignoring the Fed. And I'm not saying doing, do any tax evasion or, any of that stuff, because, for my licenses, I've got to put that caveat out there. But really, it's going to end itself, whether I put all my efforts into this or not. It's going, and great, if we do audit the Fed, do I actually think that they're going to give us the actual legitimate answer of everything that's going on? And even if they did, would it matter? Would the people even care? Would they stop, looking at, the NFL and watching, whatever bread and circus is going on? So I think your message is appealing, that it's going to end no matter if you want it to end or not. And it's just whether or not, how much effort they're going to take to really constrain us to make sure that we can't have our own system. And so with blockchain, I really see that being one of the biggest advancements possible to being able to free ourselves from this behemoth. So really, once you understand how the Federal Reserve works and how the whole financial system works, or doesn't work, depending on how you look at it, it's really inevitable. I mean, at a certain point, are we just going to start paying, $2 trillion a year in interest, and then, is 100% of our money just going to go towards interest? And at that point, at what point of taxation are we not slaves?
So I went and game through like all the different collapse scenarios a while ago, like years ago, because I really don't buy into any of
every night in my head.
Yeah, well, because I really don't buy into any of these big doomsday scenarios. All the potentials of a collapse seem like there might be a few months of turmoil. But certainly at this point, where we have Bitcoin and all the altcoins as functional systems as they are, even if the dollar collapsed, we'd be okay. There'd be a lot of turmoil. There'd be some upheaval as people find new mechanisms based on that. But I mean, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but the dollar collapses, the government collapses, the infrastructure like electricity or water collapses. What are the other ones? The internet collapses, right? Now
we're gonna have Nexus. We're gonna have blockchains up in space.
Right. So if the dollar collapses, I'm not worried.
And the dollar could actually strengthen a lot, because when you look at the other countries around the world having $10 trillion of negative interest rates, if you're going to get negative 0.1% in Japan, then why put your money in Japan when you can put it in America? So there's actually the case where, because of demographics, where the average, the baby boomers right now, are going to start really being forced to take money out of their IRAs, forced liquidations. They realize they didn't save enough money, so now they're going to have to downsize their house. And there's really, the case that you could actually see some deflation in the short term. But how this goes is really anybody's. We could sit here and prognosticate all day.
But the long term, You can tell, like, for the first time ever, good money is chasing out bad, namely cryptocurrency-based technologies are chasing out government fiat currency. So, I'm not following too much the flow in between the fiat currencies and the various maneuvering between the central banks, but looking at just the United States and even what I'm about to say about all these other scenarios, there's not a single one of these that if it happened that we wouldn't be able to recover. Like I'm all about being a prepper, but my scope of prepping is based on a much shorter timeline than I think a lot of people imagine with some of these doomsday scenarios. Like even if
you've got nothing to begin with, you've got nothing to lose. And if the average person has nothing to begin with, I mean, it's only the top really 10% that have all the financial assets. The other 90% are fucked anyway.
I'd have a bunker if I could. If it was convenient for me and I could snap my fingers and have a perfect bunker, but I'd have 2 years of food supplies being excessive, not 10, 30 years of food supplies. Not, and I don't think that kind of collapse is
10 to 30 because if it does collapse, a lot of people would die off in the first.
Even if it was that, but but I don't think a scenario where most people die off is even realistic.
No, I don't.
And what you pointed out about Trump, just to bring it back to the politics here, like what you pointed about Trump versus Hillary. When I scale back, you can look at them and say, well, there's significant differences, but in all of these bigger dynamics, they're both irrelevant. They're both power brokers who are serving essentially the same string pullers. The same corrupt interests are in charge. It's all window dressing, and until the paradigm shifts, at least away from needing big central governments. And
Republicans aren't talking about cutting any government. And where's this whole new tax plan? They want to, supposedly cut taxes, which I have a whole podcast on how that's all bullshit and it's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, of course.
But where have the Republicans actually proposed cutting government spending? Every year it's...
Well, they propose it. They're good at proposing it. Not so good on the follow-through.
And so it gets to a certain point where, the only reason last year I was very... I was initially gung-ho for the Libertarian Party. I was going to support Gary Johnson. I supported him in 2012 out here. I was at an event in 2011 out here in Scottsdale with him. I'm an Ironman triathlete just like him. So, but then it got to the point where, they're talking about, you got, the whole gay cake issue. And then you've got but the big one for me is Bill Weld did this interview in August 2016 where he starts talking about, AR-15s, yeah, of course, they're dangerous, but, handguns are even more dangerous than AR-15s, and we need to start limiting handguns. And at that point, I'm having friends come up to me who are...
Is this what libertarianism is?
So really it got to that point where, I thought Hillary was I said I was going to do everything I could to stop Hillary and Jeb Bush, and as long as somebody... I don't ask for much. It's like, as long as they're not part of, Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, or Goldman Sachs, it's, maybe that's all I asked for. And so I'm like, okay, that gives me, Rand Paul, the Libertarians, and, which actually Bill Weld, I think he is CFR, so I'm not even sure if that even...
Yeah. Oh, man.
And you can see that the party is really positioning him to be the next forerunner. So I get different...
the Libertarian Party is?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Well,
that in and of itself represents a misunderstanding of what the Libertarian Party is.
Well, in terms of the Nick Sarwarks of the world would be trying to position.
What is Nick Sarwark doing to help Bill Weld?
When I see that some of the fundraising literature that's coming out to my house, they really some of
say Bill Weld on it.
It had a picture of Bill Weld on it, and
because he was the nominee from last cycle. And the thing is, you personally, one person, could have changed the outcome. I like to tell people there's not a single complaint about the LP that I've heard that couldn't be solved by the person complaining, showing up and doing something about it, even that Gary Johnson was the nominee. There were 1,100 delegate slots, roughly, in 2016. And at the start of the convention, about 100 of them were empty. I don't mean the chairs, I mean the slots didn't have people with them, because at most state conventions, when they said, hey, we got 10 slots, who wants to go? They didn't get 6 or 7 people, and they were filling them in even leading up to that, and then Gary Johnson was able to bring his people in from other states and from the Comic-Con next door to fill those slots at the last second. He didn't even win on the first ballot. He had 49.5%. On the second ballot, he won with 55-something, which means that 100 delegates, 8 or 9% of the vote there could have gone to McAfee, Perry, Peterson. And if it had, one of them would have been the nominee, most likely Peterson, possibly McAfee. But it would not have been Gary Johnson, because on the floor, the chants were McAfee, Peterson, Perry, anybody but Gary. If Gary would not have been able to get 50%, with everything he was doing to I don't want to say circumvent, but just to game that process better than anybody else was, bringing his
Which you have to give him credit for doing that, because he was...
But even he didn't run a serious delegate strategy or serious delegate campaign. We're changing the game on that in 2018 in an off year. And this idea that there are going to be non-competitive seats in the party, it's an embarrassment that ends in 2018 for the LP. So
and what's a non-competitive seat?
As in those empty seats were not competitive, that anybody who showed up could have said, yeah, I want to be a delegate. And
I came to New Orleans to party, and I'm just
now I'm going to be a delegate. Yeah, not going to happen in 2018. We're going to change that.
So how far ahead of time do you have to be registered?
One person means one person on any of those campaigns making phone calls to the right 100 people in the states where those empty slots were. Just getting people to show up would have changed the outcome of that race. One person could have done that.
And that's where I agree with Nick, where I made some complaints, and he's like, well, nothing's stopping you from going in, and I got to give him credit for that.
Well, tonight, here, that's what we're doing at Ernie's. We're signing people up. This is what we've been doing all over the country, motivating people to get involved. And one of the things that's kind of sad as a dynamic of the libertarian movement is that you have a genuine faction in the party of Gary Johnson types. It's pretty small. It's probably less than a third of people who are actually Gary Johnson, libertarian-leaning moderates. And of Johnson's support within the party, I think most of it is from people who are voluntarists who want to hide behind the skirts of someone who they think is going to give them credibility because they woke up so long ago. I mean, a lot of these old party people woke up in the 70s and 80s when you were really alone, and they're afraid of the message, but they compromise their principles to appeal to more people, and then the inevitable consequence is you appeal to less people because it's obvious that you compromise your principles. So, if I may, to make this point visually, there's this sort of old guard part of the party, right? And even then, I'd say the majority are voluntarists, but a lot of them are those kind of afraid ones. And then you have people who wake up and become voluntarists really fast, and they get involved in the party, and they see that, oh man, these people are in charge, and they go. And then more come, and they get sick of it, like even you. They come and they go, oh, well, Gary Johnson was the nominee. Oh, well, I'm going to get less involved. Even you, right?
Well, and I was initially still enthusiastic about him. It wasn't really until August that I decided
right.
to.
Even, yeah, that's my point. Is even
it was the end of August. I'm like,
even you who wanted to hang on here, who wanted to stay with the party, even you were like, at the end, the thing is there's way more of us than there are of them. There are way more philosophical, principled, ethical libertarians than there are the political libertarians. And I don't mean to demean them in any way, because I used to be one of them too. That's how I came into the message. But if we want to grow the party, it's what attracts people is principle and policy that makes their lives better. Not this compromise and we're gonna make some things better and some things worse, and be more in line with our aesthetics.
I see it right now as a party. I mean, at the political, country club LP portion of this, I see it really.
Oh man, I wish we had country clubbers in the LP. We'd have a lot more money.
No, I mean, I see it being this like virtue signaling, social justice warrior, crap that's going on, and it's like that's not the reason why. I mean,
you mean Bill Weld? You mean like the Bill Weld kind of stuff?
I mean, yeah, some of that, but I mean, I just see.
So that's not the party. Those are people who show up at the last minute of the convention.
I'm not saying it's the. What I was saying is like the politicos who are there behind the scenes doing this. I think I've seen a lot more social justice warrior. We've got a virtue signal out there. So I mean,
from who?
I mean, I've seen it like on Facebook of the people that are out there calling themselves libertarian, like some more prominent people that they've got to throw out virtue signal. I mean, even and
how is this the party? Because I mean, I see Nick Sarwark on what he puts out, very representative of the message, in line with the party base. What I see from Arvin Vorha, I mean, he's actually getting heat for being too principled, for being too direct and blunt and abrasive even.
I've seen people call you out for being too statist. I'm like, well, if Adam Kokesh is too statist, then
I don't want to call me statist. We're setting a very low bar there.
Yeah,
but yeah. So I mean, and the kind of negativity is just one of these things that's really silly, that it really should have no place in our movement. I understand the room for intellectual conversation, but it's a lot of tearing people down, and I think it really has a detrimental effect. When again, if we make this about localization, the everybody gets what they want strategy, the division between anarchist, minarchist, constitutionalist, even libertarian socialist or alt-right libertarian types, all of those divisions become irrelevant. We can unite not just all the splinter groups within the freedom movement, but left, right, and center against the common enemy of big centralized government.
And for people who think that you might be too extreme, let's say you take your average maybe Trump voter who might be more of a leave me alone-ist, or maybe they might be more libertarian, but they're still voting for Trump. What do you have to say to those people? Because a lot of them, if they hear your message right up, no one wakes up one day and says, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. There's going to be some sort of progression. And I guess if I want to bring it back to Nick Starbuck for a little bit.
If I may jump into that,
okay,
you're thinking about this in ideological terms. Most Americans are pragmatists. Hey, you want a big pay raise? We're going to eliminate the IRS. Pentagon's not going to just get to lose $6 trillion of your dollars whenever it feels like it. No more militarization of local police. No more federal regulation, red tape. No more loss of all the stuff that we lose to the bureaucracy and the pain and suffering and money and time and emotional investment. All that goes away. Is there anything your state government can't do better than the federal government? Cool. Then you're on board. That's it. The Republicans and Democrats don't win by getting people to read books about conservatism and liberalism. They win by winning on building coalitions around practical policy, and localization is that. So back to Nick.
Yeah, no, that was a great segue. But the first time I met him, I told him a little bit about what I was doing and how I've got a lot of, I guess what you call more Trump voters who are following me, and how I'd like to share with him some of the things I was doing to get Trump voters following me, and how there could be a good way to help broaden the coalition, I guess, so to speak, and bring him into the party. And he actually told me, this was in a parking lot in Phoenix, probably around like March, April time frame, doesn't matter. He said, you know what, Tim? He goes, we want nothing to do with anyone that voted for Trump. We don't want anything to do with anyone that even thought about voting for Trump. And really, we have a natural ally with the left, and we want nothing to do with anyone who considers themselves right. And so at that point, it was like, well, fuck you very much. Like,
Has he said this in writing? Is he?
This was to my face. Okay. So I mean, you just have to.
I think if you put him on the spot on the record and say, hey Nick, do you want people who voted for Trump to change their perspective and come on board with the Libertarian Party? He'd be like, yeah, of course, that's my job to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a boogeyman being raised again. But if Nick is doing that. If Nick is doing something, again, in actual party policy to make this an exclusive debate club and push people away, I haven't seen it. And the answer is out-organize him. Bring those people in. Because there's nothing he can do to actually stop an individual from joining the Libertarian Party. It's a platform. That's the point. Anybody who shows up can make whatever they want out of it.
Yeah, I've got to give him credit that, my deciding to vote for Trump was... I thought at the very least, keeping the Second Amendment and getting some I thought Hillary was such a bad... I thought that was such a bad option.
Trump is going to defend your gun rights.
I think compared to the alternative, and a lot of libertarians give me some credit, said that he had zero chance of getting in, and I was going to vote libertarian.
Neither of them...
He's not the answer. I mean, he's not the answer.
Neither Trump or Clinton have any significant chance in 4 years of meaningfully changing firearms policy nationally one way or another. You imagine Hillary Clinton, if she says, the absolute priority of the Clinton administration is to get safer streets by, she can't even say eliminating private gun ownership because she's come out before and taken the moderate position of being, pro certain firearms ownership, blah, 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 right? But
then it's the Supreme Court judges.
How much could Trump do? Well, could he really? Maybe he could get. So if Clinton was doing that, like, what could she do? She could increase background checks and those kinds of restraints, right? Yeah. And then if you go, but the biggest thing is the consent of the American public. What will we tolerate for taking our rights away?
The culture, right? The opinion.
And so you think about it with Trump, though. Even with Trump pushing for gun rights, is he going to change non-constitutional carry states to constitutional carry states? I mean. Yeah, if he said the sole priority of the Trump administration is to, make gun laws more favorable to gun ownership, only then could he even do it in any meaningful way. Whereas at least voting for Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, even as bad as they might have been that way, was an investment in the message and the party and the word libertarian in the American political conversation. So that's why, while I wasn't allowed to vote myself, I definitely endorsed and supported the Johnson-Weld ticket through the end of 2016.
And I had no problem with people that did. I mean, I thought it was a lot better than the some of the alternatives that are out there. And I'm actually coming out with a shirt that says "Make the LP Libertarian Again." So
you hear Ben talk about that tonight. He says we want the headlines after 2018 to read "Libertarians have taken over the Libertarian Party."
Yeah, I used to say that that the left, there's nothing liberal about the left. There's nothing really conservative about the right. I think the libertarians, want everyone in their party except for actual libertarians, but it comes down to people like me, having to get involved, people, who are watching this having to get involved, because it doesn't take that many people I don't want to use the word hijack, but to influence or
to take over the Libertarian Party.
Yeah. It doesn't take that many people.
We call it the Drive for 985. That's rounding up 7/8 of the national delegation. And we already have more than twice as many people as we need to pull this off. We're going for it, and we are on track to get up to about 3 times as many to account for attrition and seats that we might lose to competition. But there really isn't any in 2018 except the party establishment, which is mostly on our side on these issues already. From traveling the country, most people in the Libertarian Party who we've talked to support localization, and they support the unity concept of bringing people in who aren't libertarian because we want a coalition. I mean, you want to talk about moving in the right direction? This is it. And is it an extreme? You mentioned earlier saying that it's an extreme platform.
No, it's to people who like the devils. I mean, if I bring up this stuff.
Well, let me address it. Yeah, so it's that about localization and how that plays into that sort of analysis, which is a silly rhetorical thing,
extreme
right?
Freedom.
Like if you have a cancer, we're going to extremely cut it out of your body. Is that extreme? Sure, okay. But I do like the word radical, because radical means striking at the root of the problem, which is kind of the opposite of extreme, which is sort of going out to the fringe or the parameters. And that's kind of right and left, or big government center of the extreme proposal that we're going to keep this destructive, evil, counterproductive system going. Whereas the radical alternative is to say, no, let's get to the root of the matter. And when it comes to political philosophy, it's extremely moderate to say the states are going to. We're not going to argue about the role of government. We're not going to argue about the scope of government. We're only going to come to an agreement on the geographic scale of government, which is that it should be a lot more local than it is now. It should be smaller and eventually down to the community and the individual level.
And who wouldn't want that? I mean, I'd say from like the left standpoint, you've got a chance now to have more control over your government if you want a bigger government. And from the right, they're supposedly state rights.
Same thing, exactly.
Same thing. And I see that
everybody gets what they want. If you like your government, you can keep it.
And who would honestly like this government? But if you
at the state level, if you want, if people in one state said we want to live under the exact same system that the federal government has, just scaled down to the state, okay, go for it. Yeah, but they're going to at least have to start from where they are now with the state government and build up to that.
So as a process, you have to go to New Orleans in 2018 to then. So walk us through. So you become a delegate. You basically sign a piece of paper.
Sure. Or it's very easy. In most states, all you have to do is be a member of the national party. It's $25 registration online. And then you go to the state convention. In fact, you could probably do it at the state convention. So if you showed up to a state convention with $25 and a pulse, and there's an open seat, literally all you have to do is say, oh, I'm a national party member. I want to be a national delegate. And okay, well, if there's an empty slot, they have to give it to you. I mean, so the party can exclude people. I don't want to do, but and then you show up to New Orleans in 2018 and you join the big party.
So ideally, we don't want to have people waiting to the last second and showing up and counting on that. So what's like the kind of deadline to? I'm sure it's probably varies state by state.
So for most states, that's the case. Like I said, we are going to be making it competitive because with this campaign alone, we are organizing more than enough people to fill every slot in every state. So that's really cool. We've already got that happening. And if people sign up with us on the forums at thefreedomline.com or at one of our events, as most people do, then we will hold your hand through the process. We will make it as easy as possible for you. We have a great national delegate coordinator in Angela Fisher Owens right now, and we have almost 50 state coordinators already signed up to organize within their states. We just have a few more that we're waiting, and we have a few people competing for Arizona, so tonight there might be a little geodesic dome cage fight after the presentation to see who our state coordinator for Arizona is going to be.
That's certainly a good problem to have, though.
A big part of this campaign, if I may step back for a second, is really based on this idea of making this as easy as possible. You know, I think it is a great logical fallacy that leads you to conclude we need to storm the castles with our pitchforks now, or it's 1,000 years of tyranny and darkness, as opposed to understanding that humanity progresses, that this is an evolutionary process. And even to see this as a fight is incorrect, because it's the elevation of all of humanity, even the people who are the greatest evildoers, even the string pullers and the corrupt bankers and the politicians. The goal is not to defeat them. The goal is to liberate them from their trauma, from whatever it is that has corrupted them, from their influences that have led them to do this evil upon the world. And when you see it like that, it really changes the approach here from, let's be in conflict, as opposed to let's help people, let's be loving, supportive. The state's not going to end, with a bang and a confrontation and a bunch of dead bodies. It's going to end when enough of us go, okay,
and
we don't have to do this anymore. We can put down the guns of government.
You get all these people out there on the right who say, we're ready for a civil war and we've got, the guns. And it's like, well, half of you aren't even man enough to even say anything in the information war. And guess what? If you're not willing to speak out right now before this happens, you're definitely not going to man up.
Hold on, I did this morning. You want me? I got the perfect responses. I hate to do this, but
no.
I want to pull this up. By the way, I was on my phone earlier to get that noise killed before. But no, this morning, it's a fun phenomenon to watch. I posted, in terms of a broad demographic following, there is no such thing as the alt-right or the alt-left. We just have two small groups of very confused leftists who both think they represent part of the center, when in reality, they're both so far out at the left fringe of society that non-political Americans just laugh at them. The Tiki Torch Taliban and Vanilla ISIS are punchlines. The mainstream media deliberately puts forth both as major political forces in order to confuse you, I mean the general public, of course, about the center, which is anyone who goes out and talks in politics with regular Americans on a regular basis knows is sick of all this political bullshit and is ready for fundamental change. And that's been part of the fun for me going out on this tour. People see the freedom logos on the rig and they go, "What's freedom?" And I say, "Well, it's this book I wrote in jail about
look for that.
Yeah, how we create a better world by dissolving government entirely." And most of them go, sounds like a good idea. And then I say, well, when they ask, what are you doing about it? I'm getting ready to run for president in 2020 on the platform of dissolving the federal government entirely. They go, yeah, sounds like a good start.
And these are people that don't necessarily call themselves, these are just average people. You're at a gas station.
Yeah, well, on this tour, we've been talking to a lot of mechanics with all the vehicle issues, so I like to say that now that's my slice of, blue-collar America. But yeah, we talked to a lot of mechanics, and most of them go, yeah.
We broke it down in all 50 states, and we're,
that's been this tour, yeah, 50, lower 48 breakdown. No, it's been nuts. We've replaced a rear axle, a transmission, a water pump. I don't even know how many electrical components, 5 tires, and we got another vehicle and then twice as many vehicle issues. So,
and if people want to help you out, what's the best way to do so, or can they donate crypto to you?
Yes, of course. And right now we're doing all of our business through our 501c3 nonprofit. So if you go to thefreedomline.com, that's my main website for everything. Thefreedomline.com, 3 words. And it's you can go to the nonprofit from there if you click on donate. We have our Bitcoin wallet set up there, and of course you can donate through PayPal. You can donate in kind. And we like helping people pay less in taxes. So if you want to make an in-kind contribution in some form that we can give you a receipt for to reduce your federal tax liability, taxation is theft. So we want to at least help people get away from as much of it as possible. And then if they want to get involved with the campaign, the main thing is to sign up to help with our delegate process. And like I said, for most of the states that most of the states within our organizations, it's already competitive. Like here in Arizona, there are 24 delegate seats that go from Arizona to the national convention. And Arizona's a little trickier, but we already have more than 24 people signed up in Arizona to be delegates. And tonight at the party here at Ernie's, my presentation, when we pitch people on signing up, we have, looks like we're going to have 50, 60 people out tonight. And at events, we get about 90% of them signed up. So if we get, we're going to have more people. Now, fortunately,
only 1 in 4 might, but in the grand scheme
even
of things,
from our
still,
organization,
yeah.
but we need them to help in that process as well, and to vote them in potentially as it gets competitive with other groups within the LP potentially, or other campaigns. Like the Weld campaign is the only one that we know of that's actually organizing behind the scenes right now for 2020. So there are also the alternate slots. So every state gets so many delegate slots and so many alternate slots. So we want to fill all of those and get as many people as we can who care about these issues to New Orleans in 2018.
Well, Arizona knows all about the alternate slots when it came to the Ron Paul Levolution.
Oh, just remember, it's so much easier in the LP than in the Republican Party. It is a totally different world.
And at least, if nothing else, at least some people now on the left and right are both waking up to, wait, there's super delegates over here on the left, and wait, on the right, they're like Colorado can just cancel, basically null and void the election and just give it to Ted Cruz if they want. And that's only, it's like rocket science trying to figure out all the different mechanics of how this works in each state, and it really is. I pay attention to it, and it's really daunting even for me to try to make heads or tails of everything that's going on. So it's really kind of crazy. But I did want to shift gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask: did you happen to see the most recent Curb Your Enthusiasm episode? And do you know what Curb Your Enthusiasm is?
Yes, I was a huge Seinfeld fan, but never got into Curb.
All right, so for those who don't know, Curb is a Larry David, the creator of Seinfeld, has a show on HBO where he's able to basically kind of, a lot of this typical Seinfeld exploits, except he's allowed to, swear and do all the HBO stuff. But anyways, the most
recent... And it's freestyle. It's a fun format.
Well, it's
unscripted.
Yeah, well, this most recent episode, as soon as I saw it, I immediately thought of you. So really the premise of the episode, you've got to see this now. The premise of the episode was Larry was at one of his friends' houses, and his friend's daughter's boyfriend came back from overseas, and everybody was, thanking him for his service. Like, thank you for your service, like down the line. And then it got to Larry, and he's like, hello. And then everybody's like, what the fuck are you doing, Larry? You got us thanking for his service. And then the whole thing came back around to he had
why do I gotta thank him for his service?
So
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, and so what I kind of wanted to kind of get into that a little bit, where since I wasn't in the military, anytime
you're smart enough to learn from the mistakes of others.
And so anytime, I want to speak, criticize, I'm not criticizing the troops, I'm not criticizing the 18-year-old who bought into some propaganda, because a lot of them are very good people.
Should. The thing is, you shouldn't be afraid to be able to criticize them intellectually and directly and honestly, and still be able to do so lovingly. And I think if you don't have confidence in your own worldview and your own actions coming from a place of love, then you have to worry about that. But, is someone who kills for a politician in the Middle East a murderer? Yeah, okay, technically they're a murderer. And I can have that intellectual conversation if it's relevant, if it's helpful for me to point out that when you kill someone in the military because a politician told you to, you're a murderer. If obviously there are times when it's not premeditated, but whatever, you want to parse out the application of that word. But basically, yeah, you're in certain cases you are acting as a murderer. Does it help to call someone that? Usually no. So you're not going to do it if you're coming from that place of love. But if I'm coming from a place of love, I have no problem directly saying that, yeah, you're making a mistake to join the military, that you're doing something that is fundamentally unethical. You are volunteering to kill for politicians or help kill for politicians. There's no way around that.
Now, did you think, that our freedoms were actually, so how did my freedoms get over to Iraq or Afghanistan?
Yeah, right.
I take a look at this, and really, we're a whole hell of a lot less free today than we were 16 years ago. We've got probably, I don't even know how much the wars costed, $5-6 trillion, plus the interest on it, plus the psychological damage, plus, the spouses at home and the girlfriends at home and all the people who've lost.
Yeah, it's literally incalculable.
And it's really, at this point, it's like, what have we gotten out of this? What have we gotten out of, getting, I think that Al-Qaeda would have, literally wanted us to do what we're doing over there, because now we're on their turf. They can pick us off easier. And then you get into, well, it was Zbigniew Brzezinski who created the Taliban to begin with, and it was the United States government who helped, basically was funding. I'm skipping around here, but was funding the Free Syrian Army and funding al-Nusra Front, and then they changed the name to ISIS. And then I want to point this out, and I've got all these, Vietnam type guys who are like, screw you, you weren't in the military, so you can't say this. I'm like, well, it's as bad as Vietnam was. I think it's even worse that we were over there because of the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Yeah, which
and I don't see you guys.
Proven lie. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the Gulf of Tonkin incident was the justification, the emotional string to get us into that war. It's declassified, never happened. So supposedly, the Vietnam, we're going to sink a ship called the Tonkin, and wasn't Jim Morrison's dad like the head of the fleet over there? It's kind of
it's just there was the creep up before that in the war in Vietnam with Americans as advisors, but that was the sinking of a ship in the Gulf of Tonkin that was the excuse. But to get to the bigger issue here, when you're dealing with people who are at a less mature level of intellectualism, again, trying to put this nicely, right? They're going to fall for those appeals to authority as opposed to an appeal to reason and logic. And when you say, well, I was there, so I have more of a say, and no, you have a say on what you witnessed.
And weren't you there, so then that way I could say this? I mean,
you were there. I thought you fought for my freedom of speech. Yeah, no, that's if they're really hitting you with that stupid shit. But no, if they're still at that point of an appeal to authority, this is where it's stupid. But if they're in that realm, it's like talking to someone who's less just emotionally matured. You kind of got to speak their language and say, well, as much as you are one person who was there, there's this organization called Iraq Veterans Against the War and Veterans for Peace, and there's this guy Adam Kokesh, and if you need an appeal to authority, here's the opposing one to your appeal to authority. But let's look at this logically. Let's look at this rationally. You don't need, my favorite Ron Paul quote is, you don't need to go to Iraq to read the Constitution. And I think he was making a bigger point there. You don't need to go to war yourself to know that it's the greatest evil that humanity is capable of. So when it comes to making the political point here, if you got to hide behind someone like me and say, well, Adam Kokesh is an Iraq combat veteran, if you need someone out front, to play that card, that appeal to authority, like, hey, I don't mind.
Or how is it that Ron Paul got the most amount of active military donations? More donations
from active duty service members than all other Republican primary contenders combined.
And I think at one point he had more than even Obama at one point before he had to drop out. But then they want to say, I'm being against the military, when really I think the most support you can do for the military is to not send them over there in harm's way to get killed to begin with. And if you are going to send them over there, then you sure as hell better be taking care of them when they get back here. What was it? Kissinger who said that the
military men are like dumb animals to be used as pawns in our foreign policy.
Yeah. And so I remember once I posted that on Facebook, and then I started getting like, oh, how dare you criticize Henry Kissinger and the...
Well, online, it's a lot of trolls. It was in a Department of Defense procurement document that they were looking for sock puppet software that said, we want to be able to control multiple sock puppet accounts to be able to swarm comment sections. I think...
No, I did see that, yeah.
A lot of that noise on the internet is fluffed up.
Bots.
Anyways, a lot of it is bots. Yeah.
No, that's pretty crazy. Did you see the recent study that came out like a day or two ago where it showed that it was like 66% of the baby boomers or people over 65 supported reinstating the draft, and it was even like 39% of millennials supported reinstating the draft. So you got the people who are, obviously, aren't going to be affected by this, the baby boomers.
Well, hey, if we just get 40% of the, we just get 60% of the population on board with localization, we win. You can have the draft at the state level. I don't care as much as if we can just take this first step towards freedom together of dissolving the federal government. And one of the most exciting things about this campaign for me is that we're organizing active duty military and veterans against militarism itself. We already have Military for Kokesh is a strong, vibrant group on Facebook, and we have a lot of really exciting plans for that. You saw we did a veterans march on the White House for Ron Paul in 2012. We got some big things planned for this, because this is even more fundamental than that. And I think anybody who understands freedom and how it relates to nonviolence understands that if you want to confront statism and you want to increase freedom, you have to confront militarism directly, because it really is the violent underpinning of the state.
And if there really was a huge threat to our liberty, or there really was a huge, national defense, crisis, you wouldn't need a draft. You wouldn't, if there was, if all of a sudden, the Chinese were going to storm the shores. You think, especially here in Arizona or Texas, that you're not going to be able to find a whole bunch of, guys going out there to, support the cause. And how come they don't? I mean, I think they should draft 45-year-olds and 55-year-olds, because they've already had life experiences. They've run a business.
Well, that would defeat the point, because it's always poor men dying in rich men's wars, and it's poor young men.
Song. Yeah. I forgot how the System of a Down song goes, but it's something along that. Why do we always send the poor? Why do we always send? Yeah, and it's really true, and it's really sad. And I think that you really do have the moral high ground in this position, not only the military stance of it, but the decentralization. You're not trying to force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do, and you want to give them more control, so that way they have a greater likelihood of doing what it is that they wanted to do in the first place. So when people call you extreme, or people have called me extreme, it's like, yes, I'm extreme. I'm
extremely loving. I'm extremely practical. I'm extremely moderate, and extremely broad in the appeal of what I'm putting forth, because it's the everybody gets what they want strategy.
Yeah, and I think someday, people probably study this time of history of, how the media was able to manipulate so many people into thinking war was a great idea, or to thinking, we could be over in Afghanistan for 16 years, and kind of like an Operation Mockingbird, 2.0 of how the military-industrial complex was to condition the average American to basically think, yeah, it's a great idea, and then have people like Jesse Ventura have his show get canned on MSNBC, when MSNBC is supposed to be the loving left, liberal, anti-war, but then they have two people like him, Phil Donahue, on, and they've got to get rid of them because they're anti-war and they're owned by GE, who's making all the bombs. So. No, I don't know. I would definitely appreciate all of your time today. Again, for those of you who want to go support Adam, it's thefreedomline.com. Today is the last stop in the tour. And you got anything else planned after this besides running for president, or not for president?
Oh, man, I'll just run through real quick, because we got most of the next 3 years pretty well mapped out. I'm going to Thailand Thanksgiving for family, then Thailand, then in the spring we're doing the Community and Unity Tour of state conventions, which actually starts in Florida with a Bitcoin conference, and then I go to Acapulco for Anarchapulco, and then all the state conventions. Then
hoping to see you there. So.
Yeah, and then we'll be in New Orleans a month before the national convention. Then
Is that July?
June 30, July 3rd. And then we're doing a European tour, 40 cities in 3 months in the fall. I speak, at least passively, French, German, Spanish, and Arabic, so I'll be giving speeches in those languages. And then the next spring, we're going to do China, and I'm not going to try to learn how to speak Chinese. But my book, by the way, has already been translated by volunteers into Chinese. You can get those for free on the website as well. And then we'd love to see that take off in China, of course, right now. And then the South of the Border tour, so I'll probably learn Portuguese, at least passively, for that. And then July 4, if everything goes according to plan, that's when we go from exploratory to full campaign mode. Like I said, we're going to be filing the paperwork this coming January, so in just a month or so here. And then we do the American Freedom Tour with the new book, instead of Freedom, American Freedom, which is making the case in the same format, 100 pages, easy to read, to the American people, how they'd be better off without the federal government. And then,
and it's a very easy read, by the way. I read it on vacation, and it's a great book. But
it's the primer. It's the ultimate red pill, and I can humbly call it that, because I had a lot of help in writing it and editing it and polishing it.
And you had time.
That too. So and then we do the 20-city tour in 2019, and then February 2020 we kick off that state convention tour with the Military for Kokesh March on the White House. So
very cool. We'll definitely appreciate your time today. He's a busy man, as you can tell. I don't know how he keeps all this together and manages to.
I don't know either. Sometimes I have a lot of people who are similarly inspired by this message as I am around me. I have a really good crew. I have a great team right now, and they really make it possible for me to help everybody else who wants to be a part of this movement plug in and be effective.
And if people want to, keep tabs of what you're doing, are you on, Facebook or Twitter?
Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and Steam It are the 4 that I'm actually personally active on. Yeah.
Okay. So
and then, we post the videos a bunch of other places as well.
And can they get all those details at thefreedomline.com?
Yeah, you find everything from there.
Cool. All right, so thefreedomline.com, Adam Kokesh, not for president. We thank Adam for joining us today. And,
my pleasure,
thank
Tim.
you very
Thanks,
much.
brother.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the most important steps anyone can take in investing is figuring out how much risk they can handle. We use a tool called Riskalyze, which gives you a custom risk number between 0 and 100, with 100 being the riskiest asset you could have in your portfolio and 1 being the least. In 5 minutes, we can tell you what your risk number is, and if you'd like, we can arrange to also tell you how much risk is in your portfolio, as well as what the hidden internal fees are, dividends are. This is incredibly valuable information you'll want to help prepare for your retirement. We know that not everyone who does this will become clients, but if you found this useful, please share this on your social media feeds. If you want to find out how much risk is in your portfolio, please email info@focalpointwealth.com or please call 480-771-PLAN or 7526. Thank you. Are you interested in learning more about your Social Security options? If so, we may have the perfect tool for you. You can get started by clicking on the banner ad above or the link below. From there, you simply enter your basic information and spouse information if that applies. Next, enter your full retirement age benefit amount. Then, on the next screen, you can toggle your Social Security start date along with your spouse's to see how that affects your cumulative lifetime benefits. Finally, at the end, you will be able to see how much money you are potentially leaving on the table with your current selection. And if you'd like to schedule a free consultation where we can take a deeper dive into your Social Security options using the more advanced version of this tool, please leave your contact info on the final screen along with the best time to contact you. If you get to the end and don't want to be contacted, that's fine too, but we hope that if you found value in this tool, that you can share the page with a friend on your social media feeds to help spread the word. We appreciate you visiting our site, and we hope to earn your business someday. And remember, at Focal Point Wealth Management, your future is our focus. Over the last 9 years of my career as a financial planner, one common theme emerges amongst retirees. Tim, I wish I knew this information when I was starting out, because if I did, I would be in a much different place today. If you are a millennial or are close to one that you care about, please share millennialinvestorblog.com with them, whether it's learning the differences between an IRA and Roth IRA or the importance of saving early. We've got them covered. We also have a place for them to open up their own retirement accounts for as little as $5,000. If they want our help, we'd be more than happy to assist them, but if they want to do it on their own, then that's fine too. millennialinvestorblog.com, where millennials' future is our focus.